the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently. Don't
miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, hi there, welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news from 4 until 6 in the next hour. GB News has obtained exclusive footage of around 40 migrants landing on the Dungeness beach in Kent during the early hours of yesterday morning. Striking footage, stream of migrants making their way up the Pebble Beach in the basking in the sunrise there, sent to us by a woman who has taken it upon herself to record these landings. Her name is Kim Rye, and we'll share her footage and her stories with you soon. Also today in Dover, scores more migrants brought to port by the Border Force. We'll speak to Kim Rye in a few moments. And before 6, discuss why what was once thought as an impossible journey has become almost routine. Also, will we ever learn what a team of lawyers made of bullying allegations made against Meghan Markle? The thoughts of the royal writer Angela Levin. And we'll be asking, should children be allowed into the House of Commons? A cross-party review says not, after Labour MP Stella Creasy brought her newborn son into the chamber. Is the baby ban fair? With me for the next 2 hours, the commentator Calvin Robinson. But first, we've got the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Colin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 4. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The mother and stepfather of a 5-year-old boy have been jailed for life for his murder. Logan Mwangi's battered body was found in the River Ogmore in Bridgend, South Wales, in July last year. He'd suffered 56 cuts and bruises, as well as catastrophic internal injuries. His mother, Angharad Williamson, will serve a minimum term of 28 years, and John Cole will serve a minimum of 29. A 14-year-old boy, who can't be named for legal reasons, will serve a minimum of 15 years. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. The move is in response to the threat posed by Russia. The figure is 2.5% of GDP, which is a measure of the size of the economy. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the country has the power to repel Russia.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Also at the NATO summit, President Biden said the US will support Ukraine for as long as it takes, adding the alliance is now more united than ever.
At this summit, we rallied our alliances to meet both the direct threats of Russia poses to Europe and the systemic challenges that China poses to a rules-based world order. And we've invited 2 new members to join NATO. It was a historic act, Finland and Sweden, 2 countries with a long tradition of neutrality and choosing to join NATO.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said that when it comes to Russian aggression, the alliance is preparing for any eventuality.
We face the most serious security situation in decades, but we are rising to the challenge with unity and resolve. The decisions you have taken in Madrid will ensure that our alliance continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and protect our people and our values. Europe and North America standing together in NATO.
A former Scottish MP has been jailed for 2 years for embezzling nearly £25,000. Ex-SNP member Natalie McGarry stole the money from 2 pro-independence groups. The former representative for Glasgow East was convicted last month on 2 charges of embezzlement. The judge said the 40-year-old had betrayed those who'd put their trust in her. Thousands of travellers have had their holidays disrupted after Heathrow ordered the cancellation of 30 flights this morning. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked on alternative flights. More than half of Scottish people don't want another independence referendum, according to a new poll. Research by the Scotsman newspaper says 53% think there shouldn't be an Indie Ref 2. 40% say there should be, with the remainder undecided. It's after First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced plans to push for a second vote in October next year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Colin.
Six minutes past 4. For centuries, the English Channel was seen as an unbridgeable moat around our island nation. In recent years, that article of national faith has worn thin. Migrants in flimsy inflatable boats have made a mockery of warnings that the world's busiest waterway could be routinely, if not always safely, crossed. The migrants have come at all times of the year, undeterred by winter weather or the wakes of super tankers. But it's the midsummer months, where we are now, when the numbers have been surging. One woman has taken it upon herself to record these landings. Her name is Kim Rye, and these are her pictures. Sunrise above the English Channel. A rescue vessel has just landed migrants on the shingle beach at Dungeness in Kent. These are the months people smugglers like best. Short, midsummer nights, meaning lots of daylight, for a crossing in seasonally calm waters. It's an evocative image. You could imagine a magazine editor sending a professional photographer to take them. Ideal for a Guardian headline like New Dawn for Migrants. But these pictures haven't been commissioned by a news desk in London. They're the work of a local woman called Kim Rye. Why does she get up early to do this? Because, she says, nobody else does. Something profound is happening in the community where she lives, a phenomenon with potentially far-reaching consequences, which needs, she says, to be documented. A couple of years ago, dog walkers and other early birds started to see these columns of predominantly young men disembarking on the beach. Now, it's a daily occurrence. For the rest of the country, out of sight is out of mind. But here in Kent, it's how the day often begins. Kim Rye films them, but she does something else. As a local councillor, she feels a democratic duty to speak up for local residents, to try to establish who these people who are arriving every day, uninvited, actually are and why they're here.
Why have you left France?
No, I don't speak English.
Well, you're speaking English now.
We don't speak very much.
I'm asking you why you left France.
We don't speak very much.
Along the Kent coast and Dover today, more migrant arrivals courtesy of the Border Force. Images like this you might have seen before. This port is where the mainstream media outlets send their cameras. But it's only part of the Channel migrant story. As the footage filmed by Kim Rye suggests, all along England's south coast, the equivalent of a small town's worth of mainly young men is being disgorged on the beaches now annually. The numbers keep growing, as does the affected coastline. A fortnight ago, migrants landed as far away as Devon. The English Channel, so long a watery barrier, is fast becoming a migrant conveyor belt. Well, Kim Rye, who sent us that footage, joins us now. Kim, welcome to you and thanks for your footage. Why do you take it?
I just want to correct something. I'm not the only local person that films these landings. There are quite a network of us along the coast that are doing this because we feel that our security and personal safety is being threatened.
Yeah, Kim, I don't know whether our viewers are struggling to hear you. It may just be my studio speaker. I'm struggling to hear you. But you were saying, I think that other people, you're not alone in filming what's happening there. There are other people doing it. What's changing as the months and years roll by? What are you seeing that's different now?
Well, there's a difference in the way they're being brought into this country. Well, first of all, I'll just correct this. They are not always brought into this country. There are plenty of incidences where they've landed on local beaches and been seen absconding into the countryside.
Yeah. The numbers are what we're talking about, maybe 12,000 this year. The area that's affected, it's not just the Kent coastline anymore. What we can't be sure about, even though the MOD are now involved in this operation, is whether everybody who arrives is documented, whether we know about all the people who are landing.
I can help you with that one. Let's just say I speak to people inside, and one of their MOs is to throw their documentation overboard during the journey across the channel. That's a well-known point. And they also throw their smartphones into the channel as well, because some of them have got criminal records, and this is why their applications for asylum gets delayed most of the time.
Why do you ask them directly why they didn't stay in France? What's the point of doing that?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question then.
Sorry, Kim, I'm just wondering, in the footage that we've just run, you're seen asking some of the migrants why they didn't stay in France or why they've come from France. I mean, it's a question we often ask here. If you're fleeing persecution for a safe haven, the first European country you'd come into would do, wouldn't it?
Well, the big question mark here is, why are they leaving a safe country? They've been through several safe countries before they got here. Why are they risking the lives of children? Because they're now bringing children in more, since they were told they have a better chance of staying if there are children in the vessel. Why are they putting those children's lives at risk in the most dangerous stretch of water in the world? I don't understand why any responsible adult would leave a safe country, risk their lives, risk other people's lives, and the lives of the people who have to save them out there, but most particularly the lives of children, innocent children. Why would you do that if you were a responsible adult?
And these people may just be passing through your community, Kim. I'm not sure how many of them want to stay in. I think your nearest town is Lydd, isn't it, on the Romney Marsh? I'm guessing most of them are actually desperate to or on their way to join whatever ethnic diaspora they belong to. Are you surprised, though, by... I know you said it's not just you filming, for instance, but how little interest there is in the daily story that's unfolding as you see it? Because this is... The point I'm trying to make in my piece at the top there is that this is something that's happening every day on our shores.
Well, I'm shocked at the number of people, both in this community and outside, that are not aware of what's happening on these beaches. Some people are not even aware that this is happening, and they're not aware of the circumstances in which it's happening. We see it here. We see them. There are several that have absconded. They're seen walking along the coast road. Some of them are wet. It's obvious they've just come out of the sea. We see discarded clothes on the beach, and we see people running across the countryside. I mean, what other country in the world could you be doing that? You know, you just walk into a country. This coast has been defended for centuries, most notably against Operation Sea Lion during World War II. And now people can just walk up the beach and enter the country illegally, and they are told they have entered this country illegally by the police, and they are told that they are under arrest. And that's another point, because if they're under arrest, and I asked a police officer this, why are they not being detained? And I was told, excuse me, I was told with a shrug, there's nowhere to put them, there's no room. And that's the key factor here. There is no room. This is a small group of islands. We are very, very welcoming to people who want to come here and improve their lives. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I've even got friends who are legal migrants, and even they are distressed at what's happening on this coast.
Kim Wright, keep sending your pictures. We'll talk to you again, I hope. Thanks for your contribution. Okay. Thanks a lot. Calvin Robinson alongside me in the studio today. Calvin, it's a sort of freelance operation. Well, actually, it's not even a freelance operation. You get paid for being a freelance. This is somebody who has decided that she has a democratic responsibility as a local councillor to record what's happening in the midst of her community, which she feels is ignored. What do you make of it all?
I like how Kim said she's documenting it because someone has to. Absolutely right. She's asking the right questions. You know, why have you left France? What is your reason for coming here? Because if these were genuine refugees seeking asylum, surely they'd want to keep all their paperwork, all their documentation to help them get an asylum in this country. The fact that they're throwing them in the water halfway across the channel suggests to me that something illicit is taking place. And not only that, why are they crossing in the middle of the night? Why is it all... It's all underhanded, isn't it? It's all... You know, our government has one job. Well, it has many jobs, but the primary job of the government is to protect the borders of this country. And if it's not doing that, I suggest it needs to take a look at better approaches. The reminder situation has been debated many times, but it's not having an effect, is it?
How do you answer this question, though, Calvin? If you are somebody, let's say, you know, you're a committed Christian. Let's say you're a committed Christian in Pakistan. You're one of the 2% of Pakistan's population who is a Christian, and you're having a pretty bad time of it right now, and you have done for years, and you would love to come to it to be a safe country. How do you apply for asylum in the UK from Pakistan? I mean, it's not an academic question. My point is, where are the legitimate routes for asylum?
So I suppose my first instance would be to speak to the British Embassy or to speak to a British charity, well, probably a Christian charity if I'm a persecuted Christian. That would be the first approach I would take. I wouldn't find my way to France and then illegally cross the Channel Tunnel, because there are many Christians in France, to be fair, that you could ingratiate yourself with.
Good point. Calvin, thanks very much indeed. A busy day in the royal household with two big stories making the papers today. First, the release of the monarchy's annual financial statement, where a multi-million-pound renovation of Buckingham Palace helped to drive up the cost of royal living. Second story, another Meghan dilemma, Buckingham Palace confirming that details of an official investigation into bullying claims made against the Duchess of Sussex will not be published. In March 2021, it was claimed that Meghan Markle had driven two personal assistants out of their jobs after, quote, humiliating them on several occasions, claims that she strongly denies. A private legal firm conducted an private investigation into those allegations on behalf of the palace, but the recommendations of the report will not be published. Palace says it's because of the confidentiality of discussions involved in drafting that report. Joining me now, the royal biographer and commentator Angela Levin, who's here in the studio. Angela, welcome to you.
Hello.
What do you want to talk about first? Should we talk about the royal finances first?
OK.
Yeah.
I think, The amount of money this year is only 17% more than the previous year. The previous year, no one could go anywhere because of the pandemic. This year, the senior royals are working double time to catch up and go abroad and to expand. So it was bound to be more expensive. I think that the royals do us a jolly good job, working incredibly hard and bring in a lot of money and tourists and all those things. And I don't mind them if they charge quite a lot of money.
Just on the point about the loot, and I'm ready to stand corrected, but I used to sort of cover the royals years ago. I know that the funding model has changed since I was covering their beat, but my understanding is that the sovereign grant comes from the Crown Estate. And the Crown Estate, for those who don't know what it is, a lot of it used to be, hundreds of years ago, royal property, large parts of Regent Street, for instance, and it produces an income. And it's from that the royal sovereign grant comes. And I'm hearing endlessly today people talking about taxpayers' money going to the royals, and that's not the same thing, is it?
No, taxpayers' money does go to the royals, but if you work it out per person, it comes to a couple of pounds each a year. Well, I certainly don't mind doing that. It's cheaper than a rail ticket, isn't it?
And Meghan.
And Meghan.
Is she a bully?
Well, we can't say yes because she's denied it, and we can't say no because we don't know the information. So you have to look around, don't you? You have to see. In Meghan's time, there's so many people who've left after 6 months or a year. And also the people who work for the royal family are devoted to them. They're not moaners, they're not lazy. They're very pleased to do almost anything they can. They work long hours, very hard, non-stop. And I think that shows that she's not an easy person to work with.
I'll just take up her part a little bit. I mean, it's a matter of fact, as you say, that a couple of her PAs left in short order.
More than a couple.
More than a couple? OK.
Not just the PAs. I mean, since it's been the Archie Foundation has got going, there's several people who've left since then.
She maybe just has an unorthodox working style. Maybe she drives them quite hard to achieve results. There's ways of spinning this.
Yes, but usually if people drive you hard, they're enthusiastic and you like it and you don't mind working. It's people who don't want to work hard who complain about being driven hard, because it can be very stimulating and exciting. So we don't know. But I think it's very wrong of the Queen to decide that nothing comes out, because the people who left traumatised, two of them are traumatised, and I think they both still have some lingering of that. I think it would be very important to tell them what they're going to do for other people or how they want to remanage things. But they hadn't been told anything about the investigation, if it was going to come out or not come out. And I don't think you can... I understand family comes first. A lot of us think family comes first. But I think you also have to care for the other people and not let them come last. You've got to do something for them that makes them feel that they're talking to the investigators has some point to it, because it's very hard to tell the stories that have been very hurtful to you.
Calvin Robinson, as an ordained minister, man of the cloth, introduce some mercy to this conversation. Should we be forgiving of the excess of Meghan Markle, if that's what they are?
If she's repented and apologised, absolutely. I don't think she has. I think the Queen's right not to release this publicly. I think the people involved should be aware of what the conclusion of the report was, and then it should be up to them. They should maybe be released from their non-disclosure agreement so they can talk about their trauma if they want to, because it's between them and Meghan Markle. It's not really about the rest of us.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting principle. We'll get to talk about this some other time, as you're out of time now, but this point about whether people feel they have an absolute right to transparency from the palace as if it was a government organisation.
But the Queen was following Prince Philip's belief that you have to be open, you have to be transparent. She was doing that for a very long time. I'm a great fan of the Queen, but she's not keeping that bond that she had with him.
Interesting. Angela Levin, lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Now, Heathrow was plunged into chaos this morning after cancelling 30 flights at the last minute. The airport, which is one of the busiest in the world, told airlines last night that it had to remove the flights from its morning peak schedule because of shortages of staff. It meant 5,000 travellers woke up to find their flights had been affected. One social media user saying they left home at 3:30 a.m. only to find their flight cancelled on arrival at the airport. The latest disruption in a summer of what's been described as chaos for holidaymakers in the UK. Chronicling that chaos, the travel editor of The Independent, Simon Calder, who joins us. Simon, welcome to you. Big hole in the schedule. How does that happen?
Well, there's chaos, Colin, and there's chaos. And my take on this is that it was wishing to avoid the chaos of people being unable to get through the security queues, which explains the quite surprising and last-minute schedule intervention, as it was called by Heathrow, about this time yesterday. Instead of watching your programme, they were busy telling all the airlines, right, you've got to cut about 10% of your flights in the crucial first wave from 6 a.m. to 12:30, so lunchtime. And that led to British Airways cancelled about 15 flights on top of the 100 plus they'd already cancelled for today. And furthermore, you had Virgin Atlantic grounding a flight to the lovely New York, KLM to Amsterdam, Paris flights on Air France. One or two of those didn't go. And all in all, it was messy, but not necessarily chaotic. My first question to Heathrow was, well, hang on, are you going to be doing this again? And answer came there, none. Fridays are the busiest day at Heathrow, and kind of always have been, because you've got a combination of business travel, lots of family traffic, and of course people going away on holidays. So I'm kind of slightly half expecting something like this tomorrow. Hasn't happened yet, and let's hope that it doesn't.
Just more broadly on, we've talked a lot about lots of different airlines being affected, lots of different airports affected, lots of different forms of transport being affected. But just on the specific point, Simon, about Heathrow, all the conversations in recent years, capacity, expansion, third runway. Well, you hardly need a third runway if you can't get enough staff to keep the flights running that are currently scheduled to fly from your airport.
Well, yes. Heathrow, of course, says that when we are building back better and we are wishing to become global Britain, we absolutely need more capacity. And that actually, with the third runway, you get yet another terminal, and that would help to ease the pain. But this is really just a reflection of the stresses and strains that we're seeing in aviation right across the UK. Gatwick Airport is probably worst affected in terms of last-minute cancellations. And as from tomorrow, the airport bosses are saying, right, no more than 825 flights a day. We can't cope with any more of that. Than that. So airlines, you're going to have to cancel your flights until you get down to that number. It will slightly increase in August to 850. But I think the only way we're going to get through this summer is if we do get more airlines cancelling flights, so that the resources to take you and me and hopefully our luggage on holiday a fair match with the number of people who are wanting to travel. And unfortunately, guess how that scarce resource is going to be allocated? Price, and they are going through the roof.
More price rises, fantastic. Simon Calder, nice to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Coming up, the government says it could give up to 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers infantry training in Britain every 120 days. We'll speak to the former SAS trooper, Phil Campion, why British Army training maybe makes a big difference. Back in a tick.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 4:29. We'll start with some breaking news this hour. The 14-year-old boy who was convicted of murdering Logan Mwangi in South Wales has been named as Craig Mulligan after a judge lifted an anonymity order. The 5-year-old's body was found dumped in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather, John Cole, were also convicted and jailed for life and will serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Mulligan will serve a minimum of 15 years. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. The move's in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK has also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the country has the power to repel Russia.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Thousands of travellers have had their holidays disrupted after Heathrow ordered the cancellation of 30 flights this morning. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked on alternative flights. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Colin.
Well, we just ran a report looking at footage from Dungeness of what are effectively now daily arrivals of dozens of predominantly young men on the beaches there from across the Channel. What to do about it? Well, Sean, one of many of you who's emailed in, he says, just saw your programme. The illegal immigrants that landed yesterday, young fit men, no elderly. Again, the blankets they're given could be given to the British elderly and people who are having problems with their heating bills. Winter is only around the corner. Mike says, in this time of economic hardship, while you struggle with energy and food bills, how can our government justify this? It's time for people to say no more. And Paul says those so-called do-gooders need to open their eyes and see that 99% of the illegal migrants crossing the Channel are young males. I'm just on a point of statistical fact. It's definitely not 99%. It's the majority. It's just not 99%. Now, let's turn to a different story. Britain is giving Ukraine £1 billion for weapons. But does it have enough soldiers who are able and fit to use them? It's no shortage of young men willing to fight, but what about their training? Today, pictures from Salisbury Plain showing Ukrainian recruits being taught basic infantry and gunnery skills as part of a plan to bring Ukraine's raw recruits up to speed. So far, more than 450 soldiers have received training on a range of different weapons systems. The Ministry of Defence says it could give 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers infantry training every 120 days. We turn to the former SAS trooper Phil Campion for his thoughts. Phil Campion, welcome to you. What's different from British Army training, say, compared to what these Ukrainians would have learned locally?
Well, look, first of all, we have academies that are established over hundreds of years in the UK. Sandhurst, the Brecon, the School of Infantry that we have there, that produce some outstanding soldiers that have been proved, tested, and proved again. So it just makes sense if it's them that do some of this training for the Ukrainians, who probably, a lot of these guys have been forced into a position where they never wanted to join the army. They're being drafted in. So it's you know, the fact that they're coming over here for training, it's a no-brainer for me.
Good. After which, I'd say 12 weeks, where it's possible to instill some really important lessons that will keep some of these people alive.
Yeah, I think, look, with the gunnery in particular, if you look at the light gun, for instance, the howitzer they've got there, a lot of these guys have already put a lot of rounds down the range towards the Russians. So a lot of their training will be top-up training and conversion training to learn the new kit that they're likely to get their hands on. I'm not sure how many soldiers will be coming over who are completely raw and straight from sort of like doing nothing to something, but certainly there isn't time to give them a full course. And so, you know, when you look at that, it makes our system, which is tried and tested, probably best place that they could go to get the sort of training they need to get them up to speed and deployed. It's a difficult task in 12 weeks. It's not going to be easy, but if there's anywhere they can do it, it's over here, and that's for sure.
We look back, I was just thinking back to those difficult missions in Iraq and Afghanistan in particular, where British soldiers, British trainers were trying to teach young men there how to become soldiers and fight in their own country. And that was a very different proposition. I mean, here you're talking about Ukrainians who are absolutely signed up to the mission.
Yeah, they are. They're signed up. They're committed. They've been pushed into a corner. They have no other choice other than to fight. And a lot of them are willing and want to fight. It's not like anybody's making them fight. So, you know, I've always said, you know, a conscript army is a very difficult army to deal with, all right? But when somebody wants to join, when somebody wants to volunteer, when somebody wants to go and fight, then you've got something you can really work with, you know what I mean? And a lot of these guys, you know, in fact, I'd say 100% of these guys are turning up, they're keen, they're bright-eyed, they're bushy-tailed, they want to get involved, they want to learn, and that's a dream for any instructor. If you've got students that want to learn, it makes that job so much easier.
Phil Campion, just a final thought on maybe what you're hearing from old colleagues about the state of readiness of the British Army. We've been focusing a lot on this big NATO summit in Madrid. There's talk of maybe boosting UK troop numbers deployed to Estonia. There's senior generals saying it's time to raise our state of readiness, be ready for conflict even. What's the mood amongst former colleagues, comrades in arms of yours?
No, this army is always involved, it's always busy, it's always ready, and the blokes will be chomping at the bit to get involved, I can tell you that now. All the lads and lasses who've signed up, taken the Queen's shilling, are more than ready, prepared and willing to go and do their bit, so that ain't an issue for me. They'll be absolutely loving it. In fact, they'll probably be upset that they're being held back at the moment, you know what I mean? So, yeah, there's no dramas there, buddy.
Phil Campion, appreciate your time as ever. Thanks very much indeed. Calvin Robinson is alongside me as a man of the cloth. You're not meant to be jingoistic, nor are you, as Phil seems to be, keen to recognise that there is an appetite there for getting involved, maybe, when the time comes. The idea of training people to fight, we're supplying weapons, but the knowledge is also important, it would seem.
It's fundamental. There's no point giving people all these weapons and all this money if they don't know what to do with it and how to use it. And we have some of the best armed forces in the world. Big Phil is right that our armed forces are rearing and ready to go whenever we need them to. So why not put them to use in training people that we're spending money on? This extra £1 billion, though, I question that. Where's that come from?
It's a lot of money, isn't it?
It's a lot of money in a time of need, in a time where, our national insurance rates are going up, the cost of everything is going up, and somehow we found £1 billion to send to a foreign war. Interesting.
I asked this question yesterday of the person who was sitting in your chair yesterday, Calvin. It's a very quick way of establishing where you are on the political compass right now. If you get somebody to look at the rationing decisions they make. Yesterday we were focusing on police budgets. Yeah. The day before it was barristers wanting more cash. Last week it was railway workers. Does the defence budget need expanding? You can tell a lot about a person and their political priorities when they say, actually, I would cut foreign aid, NHS spending, defence spending, and have fewer cops.
Yes. Well, I was pleased to see that our defence budget might go up to 2.5%. I think that's good. Because as great as our armed services are, they are so small in comparison to what they were just 2 decades ago. So we could do with increasing them.
Calvin, thanks very much indeed. Coming up here, we're going to be asking whether children should be allowed in the House of Commons chamber. Cross-party review says no, after the Labour MP Stella Creasy brought her newborn son into the chamber. Is the baby ban fair? Back soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
We just had a conversation, didn't we, with Angela Levin about Meghan Markle. She often has got a bit to say about Meghan Markle, and suggestions that the report into allegations of bullying by Meghan against palace staff will not be made public. Vic writes in to say Meghan has alienated her sister, Meghan has alienated her father, Meghan has caused Harry to be alienated from his father, Meghan has caused Harry to be alienated from William and Kate. He goes on, Meghan has caused Harry to be alienated from the rest of the royal family. I wonder what the common factor is in the above. What is it about American divorcees and our royal family? Sorry, Harry, you picked a wrong one. Sean, not about Meghan, but about the cost of the monarchy, running the monarchy. Good Lord, less than £2 per annum per taxpayer. That's cheaper than one latte. I'll give £4 per annum. God save the Queen. And Deb says, we are constantly being told how wonderful Scandinavian royal families are, but Norwegians cost £5, presumably the Norwegian royal family, costs £5 per head of population. Ours are therefore far more cost effective. It's time for our debate this hour. The Parliamentary Procedures Committee, cross-party Parliamentary Procedures Committee, says babies and children should be banned from the House of Commons chamber. It follows, I'm sure you remember it, the Labour MP for Walthamstow, Stella Creasy, criticised by some, lauded by others, for bringing her 3-month-old son into the debating chamber last year. Right or wrong, this parliamentary committee to arrive at this ruling? The Conservative commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, joins me here in the studio. Angelica Malin, the editor-in-chief of About Time magazine, is offering a potentially different perspective on this. Angela, can we start with you? We've got this ruling, no babies, no children, get on with the grown-up debate.
Yeah, that just doesn't fly for me at all. I think that Westminster needs to be family friendly, it needs to be progressive, and it has to set an example to other workplaces, and it feels incredibly behind.
Calvin Robinson.
I don't think it's an appropriate place to have a young baby screeching, to be honest with you. It's the most important work in the land, legislating our laws. And before anyone starts, it's not an anti-woman stance, it's not a misogynistic stance. I don't mind if it's a man or a woman taking a baby into the chambers. It's not a place for a baby.
Angelica, I mean, if you've got an important piece of parliamentary business, maybe one of our elected representatives trying to develop a complicated theme, thinking on their feet, stream of consciousness, suddenly there's a wailing baby. I've nursed enough of them over the years to know that they can be quite disruptive, and this is not the place. The cockpit of the nation, where we frame our laws, is not the place for that kind of potential disturbance.
I mean, yes, it could potentially be distracting, but I think the larger issue is the optics around not allowing a woman to bring a baby or a child into the workplace when there is a childcare crisis. The cost of childcare is spiralling. Many women are being forced out of the workplace because they literally can't afford childcare. And until there's solutions for that, what can be expected? And I think people look to politics to understand what's going on in the workplace generally. And I don't think that it necessarily needs to be distracting, like those photos that you saw, the baby wasn't crying. And perhaps if that is the case, there can be solutions in place for that. But, and Calvin saying, I don't care if it's men or women, like, let's be honest, most likely it's going to be a woman who's bringing in a baby.
It's quite a sexist remark, really.
That the case.
Not at all. Are you saying that men can't look after their babies?
Of the childcare and women are more likely to be the ones taking longer maternity leave. They're more likely to be ones burdening more of the childcare costs.
That's another issue, isn't it, Angela?
Load.
That's another issue.
It is another issue, but unless we make workplaces more progressive, these issues aren't going to be tackled.
But if you're voting for someone to represent you as your local representative in the Houses of Parliament, surely you don't want them to be on maternity leave. Surely you want them there voicing your opinions and representing your local area. If they're off on maternity leave repeatedly, how are you getting any representation in the democratic process? You're not really, are you?
Well, I'm going to come in at this point because I think there's a couple of points we need to make clear. My understanding is that you'll be allowed to take babies and children onto the parliamentary estate.
There is a creche in Parliament as well.
But it's just the chamber. But, Calvin, do you accept that as a signal to society at large, that the idea of a man or a woman going into the chamber, cradling an infant, is quite a powerful, even pro-natalist symbol at a time when our fertility rate has crashed? We've got a pyramid that's, oh, my goodness me, that's deeply inverted. It should be like this in terms of tax. Sorry, it should be like that with lots of taxpayers at the bottom funding pensioners and the welfare state, and it's the reverse. So actually, as a symbol, as a signal to society that we are pro-child, it's a powerful one.
It is a powerful one, but it's not one I agree with. I am the most pro-family guy you'll ever meet, but I don't think people should be taking their partner, their spouses into the Houses of Parliament either. It's not a place for symbols, it's a place for legislation. It's a place for very serious business. It's a place of high standards. You know, there's a reason that they have to wear shirt and tie and jacket. They can't just rock up in their pyjamas. They can't just have their baby in a blanket in front of them. They've got serious work to be getting on with, and it's very important when we've got a cost of living crisis, a war 2-hour flight away, and we're just coming out of a pandemic, that there's so many serious issues to be getting on with. For them to be nursing their baby at the same time, I don't think it's appropriate.
Angelica, it trivialises parliamentary business. I
just don't agree with that, and I don't think people only look to it for legislation. I think they do look for it for representation, and that representation really matters. That's why this has become such a big news story. And I think it probably shouldn't be so newsworthy that a woman takes her baby into the workplace. It's a symbol of the representation of how difficult it is to manage the career that you want and to have a family, and how difficult that burden is. And like, we need to make these places more progressive. And to your point earlier about women going on maternity leave, I fundamentally find that quite a problematic stance, because we should be encouraging women into politics. We should be voting for women. And if you're worried that a woman is going to like not focus on the job because she wants to have a family, I think that's a really problematic way to look at it. And by not allowing women to bring babies into Parliament when they are juggling childcare, it's going to put women off wanting to go into politics as well.
It's fair enough saying my view is problematic, but you still haven't answered the question. It's a very important question. If people are voting for someone to represent them and that person is no longer in the chamber for months at a time, repeatedly, they're not going to have any representation. How do we get around that? Because I'm all for increasing family, I'm all for increasing people raising kids, but can you do that and be in the chamber at the same time? Does it work? Is it conflicting?
Well, if you let them bring their baby in, then they can come off maternity leave sooner, so maybe.
OK, that's where we're going to leave it. We're out of time. Angelica Malin and the Reverend Calvin Robinson, thanks both very much indeed for your time. Those landings at Dungeness, more emails, many emails coming in on that. On Twitter, John says, perhaps instead of sending soldiers to Ukraine, we should have them patrolling beaches night and day and stop them using hotels. Mal says, the cowardly French have a lot to answer for. They take no responsibility. On email, Sunny says, illegal immigrants are flooding into the UK on a regular basis, all young men of fighting age wanting to live in the UK. What our government needs to do is set up a policy of national service to earn citizenship of this country. These illegal immigrants must serve 3 years in the armed forces of the UK. Coming up after the break, we'll give you the rundown of today's 5 to 5, 5 stories that you might want to know about before 5 o'clock. First, we'll bring you the weather.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. More thundery showers around through the rest of today, but not everywhere seeing them. Some places staying dry and bright. The winds are light, which means it feels pretty pleasant in the sunshine, but it also means those downpours are slow moving. Not many isobars on the chart, not many fronts either, but in this gap, the sunshine is getting to work and sparking off those slow-moving thundery showers. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place. The potential for some disruption as those downpours, as I say, just drag their heels, dropping a lot of rain in a relatively short space of time. The showers fade from Wales and southwest England, but we'll keep some going over the Midlands, northeast England, northeast Scotland through the night. Temperatures dropping down to between about 13 and 10 Celsius. On to Friday, and it is another day of heavy showers breaking out. A wet start for Aberdeenshire and the Northern Isles, and then the showers break out quite widely. Bit more of a breeze tomorrow, so the showers will tend to move through, and actually Wales, southwest England looking largely dry through the afternoon along with Northern Ireland, but some heavy showers again over parts of the east, the risk of hail and thunder. Later in the day, more rain will push into Northern Ireland, and this is likely to turn pretty heavy through the evening with some gusty winds. The thundery showers further east should tend to fade away, but then this line of wet weather will work its way in for the weekends, making for a wet start for quite a few of us on Saturday, and that rain will steadily spread across Wales, England, and north across Scotland. East Anglia in the southeast, probably dry on Saturday, certainly until later on, as that rain then pulls away, looking drier for Wales and southwest England in the afternoon. More showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Top temperature on Saturday, the southeast, before the cloud and rain arrives, 23 Celsius, but mostly in the high teens. Still some showers on Sunday, mostly across the north and the west, looking a little drier across the south. Bye for now.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital.
Absolutely
absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Time for 5 to 5 as we discuss 5 things that you might want to know about before 5 o'clock. At 5, the UK is to provide an additional £1 billion in military aid for Ukraine. Boris Johnson announced the move at a NATO summit in Madrid, suggesting the cost of freedom was always worth paying for. At 4, West Midlands Fire Service is to trial a system for live streaming 999 calls that will allow responder control rooms to watch incidents in real time. The system will send 999 callers a text with a link which will, once connected, provide services with GPS coordinates and footage from a phone video link. At 3, peers in the House of Lords have warned the test for foreign nationals to obtain UK citizenship is too positive about the British Empire. The test describes it as a force for good in the world, and the House of Lords Justice and Home Affairs Committee found that people had less respect for the UK after taking the exam. At 2, Halifax has defended its policy of allowing staff to put gender pronouns on badges, saying that if people don't like it, they should close their accounts. That's what they said in a tweet. The bank said it was a simple solution to their colleagues being misgendered, and in response to criticism said it strived for inclusion, equality, and quite simply in doing what's right. Oh yes. And at 1, Heinz has stopped supplying Tesco with some of its products in a dispute over pricing. Baked beans, ketchup and tomato soup are all off the supermarket shelves. Heinz said that production costs were rising, but Tesco said it was refusing to pass on what it described as unjustifiable price increases to its customers. 5 things you might want to know about before 5 o'clock this afternoon. The Reverend Calvin Robinson is alongside me. I think I heard a gentle harumph when I mentioned Halifax.
Oh my goodness. They wanted to prevent their staff being misgendered. Now, this is a name badge that says Gemma. I'm quite confident that that is a female, but I might be wrong. How many of their staff have been misgendered? I mean, the percentage of trans people in the population is very, very minuscule. I doubt it's been a common occurrence.
We live in the Twitter sphere. For people who don't and haven't seen the badge, it was a Halifax employee called Gemma, and beneath it were the words she, her.
Right. So third-party pronouns. Again, if you're talking to a cashier at a bank, how often are you going to talk to them in the third person? You're not going to use their pronouns.
The story kicks on because actually a few wokey corporate entities do this, and that's not unusual. What made this story remarkable was that when somebody said, you know, I don't like this, I'm a customer, you know, I'm not very happy about it, somebody in the, we presume, corporate affairs press office at Halifax said, basically, if you don't like it, off you go.
Which is remarkable because companies have two responsibilities, one to their customers, two to their shareholders. And if they're turning off their customers, they're going to lose money for their shareholders. So what are they doing? It really is an argument of go woke, go broke, and I hope that they suffer because of this.
You know, they won't, Calvin, for the simple reason that moving your bank account from the Halifax somewhere else. What's slightly galling about this is that that the arc of evolution for a building society like the Halifax, which was there for working class folk to create a pot of money they could borrow from to build houses, live in houses, and it's now become just another corporate entity wagging the great figure, the great big finger, saying actually social engineering, do as we say, not as you think.
It is the new religion. Everyone's jumping on board because if you don't have that rainbow flag, you are a bigot and a racist and a transphobe and a xenophobe and all of these horrible things if you don't join the latest cult.
Have we got some more emails? I think we have. Oh my goodness, lots of emails today. And this is on the subject of babies not being allowed into the House of Commons, into the chamber. Diana says, don't tell me an MP can't afford childcare. Patricia says, try taking a baby to work when you're not in as privileged a position as an MP, for example, working on the till at a supermarket. Leslie says, Parliament's definitely not a place to take a baby. Important things concerning our country are debated in Parliament. That is its function. Parker says, children should not be in Parliament. Imagine if 30 or 40 women brought their child into Parliament and the chaos that could cause... it's a serious story, if they all started crying. Malcolm says, I'm a police officer. Should I be allowed to strap my baby on my chest and go out on patrol? Calvin Robinson, just on the point, it's always quite interesting to test an argument to destruction. And you can talk about this in isolation. There's a picture of Stella Creasy. But actually, would there be an upper limit on numbers? Because suddenly if you had 30, 40 babies or toddlers, anybody who's tried to reason with a toddler will know it's frequently impossible.
Well, the argument for Parliament at the moment is Parliament 50-50, isn't it? They want 50% representation of women and men. So if a large percentage of those 50%, what's that, 300 MPs? If a large percentage of those take their babies to work with them, it's going to be quite a chaotic environment.
Well, the question is whether it would be a more intelligent level of debate than we currently want.
It's just not possible, is it? Come on. Have you ever tried to debate around children?
There we will leave it. Keep those emails coming in if you don't mind. We are going to revisit at the top of the hour that extraordinary footage that we showed you an hour ago. Kim Rye is the name. She's a councillor in Dungeness in Kent. She's taken upon it herself to go at sunrise, at dawn, down to her local beach and there record the incoming waves of migrants who've been disembarking from some of the lifeboats there. We've been talking to her and we'll show you her remarkable footage again at the top of the hour. So coming up live at 5, as the number of foreign criminals being deported from the UK after their release from prison falls to an all-time low. The UK government has struck a new immigration deal this afternoon. It'll see thousands of dangerous foreign criminals deported to Nigeria. Our Home and Security editor Mark White will bring us the latest. GB News has obtained exclusive footage of around 40 migrants landing on the Dungeness beach in Kent during the early hours of yesterday morning. The striking footage of a stream of migrants making their way up the Pebble Beach in the sunrise, sent to us by one woman who's taken it upon herself to record these landings. Her name is Kim Rye. We'll share her footage with you and discuss why what was once thought an impossible journey has become almost routine. Also, royal spending's increased by some £15 million. Former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray, will explain why and the cost to the taxpayer, and find out why killer whales are ganging up on great white sharks in a gory battle for the high seas. We'll cross live to Cape Town before 6 o'clock. With me for the next hour, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. But first, the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Colin, thank you. It's 1 minute past 5. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. A 14-year-old boy who repeatedly threatened to kill his stepbrother before being convicted of his murder has been named as Craig Mulligan. 5-year-old Logan Mwangi's body was found dumped in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Ankarad Williamson, and stepfather, John Cole, were also found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Mulligan will serve at least 15 years. Senior Investigating Officer Detective Inspector Leanne Rees says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. The move is in response to the threat posed by Russia. The figure is 2.5% of GDP, which is a measure of the size of the economy. The UK also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the country has the power to repel Russia.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Also at the NATO summit, President Biden said the US will support Ukraine for as long as it takes, adding the alliance is now more united than ever.
At this summit, we rallied our alliances to meet both the direct threats of Russia poses to Europe and the systemic challenges that China poses to a rules-based world order. And we've invited 2 new members to join NATO. It was a historic act, Finland and Sweden, 2 countries with a long tradition of neutrality and choosing to join NATO.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said that when it comes to Russian aggression, the alliance is preparing for any eventuality.
We face the most serious security situation in decades, but we are rising to the challenge with unity and resolve. The decisions you have taken in Madrid will ensure that our alliance continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and protect our people and our values. Europe and North America standing together in NATO.
A former Scottish MP has been jailed for 2 years for embezzling nearly £25,000. Ex-SNP member Natalie McGarry stole the money from 2 pro-independence groups. The former representative for Glasgow East was convicted last month on 2 charges of embezzlement. The judge said the 40-year-old had betrayed those who'd put their trust in her. Thousands of travellers have had their holidays disrupted after Heathrow ordered the cancellation of 30 flights this morning. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked on alternative flights. More than half of Scottish people don't want another independence referendum, according to a new poll. Research by the Scotsman newspaper says 53% think there shouldn't be an Indie Ref 2. 40% say there should be, with the remainder undecided. It's after First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced plans to push for a second vote in October next year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, back to Colin.
The government has struck a new immigration deal this afternoon, which will see thousands of dangerous foreign criminals released from UK prisons, but then deported to Nigeria. The plan comes hours after official figures show an alarming drop in the number of foreign criminals being deported from the UK in recent years. We're joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who can take us through this. The numbers are big, Mark.
Yeah, the numbers are big, and this deal is certainly needed. A bilateral deal, a memorandum of understanding between the UK and Nigeria, one of a number of such deals that the UK government is involved in trying to expedite so that they can get foreign criminals who have served their sentence in this country, and it's a sentence of more than 12 months is the waypoint at which they decide that you should be then deported back to your home country if you're a foreign national. But there are thousands of foreign national criminals who have served their sentence and are out there. We've got some graphics, actually, figures that we can show you. First of all, 9,815 foreign offenders are currently in UK prisons. Now, of those who've been released back into the community, 10,741 have been removed from the UK since 2019, so in about the last 3.5 years. However, about 11,300 are still currently in the community, having been released from prison. They're back out in the community awaiting deportation, and that figure is nearly double what it was 4 years ago. And now, of those 3,500 who are waiting to be deported, 3,500 of them have been waiting for more than 5 years. So released back into our community, and they haven't been able to get rid of them in all of that time. And I've just lost the graphic there. And in terms of the number of the most serious Category A offenders, so these are the highest harm offenders, they're described as by the Home Office, so those convicted of murder, of rape, of serious drug dealing, and 956 of those were deported last year, which was down from about 2,200 a few years ago. So it has significantly fallen. Human rights legislation has been blamed, Colin, for preventing quite a number of these flights. There was one incident just last month where a flight to Jamaica was due to take off with 112 foreign national offenders due to be returned to Jamaica, and 12 in the end took off on that flight or landed in Jamaica.
And just to pick on one of your statistics, Mark, that one about 3,500 awaiting deportation for more than 5 years. Now, these aren't guys waiting by their front door with their bags packed. They're not awaiting deportation. Presumably they're fighting it through the courts with their lawyers. But also, the longer they're in this country, the harder it gets to deport them, because they can start claiming things like right to family life under the ECHR.
And that's what lots of them are doing, which has clearly upset many people, including, of course, the Home Secretary, who's been very vocal in this, which is why they want to see changes brought about in the likes of the British Bill of Rights. Many people want to come out of the ECHR, though, to make it much more difficult for that right to family life to be invoked, to allow these people to thwart this legal process and by the Home Office and stay in this country. I should say as well that the Home Office do say that the pandemic has had a role to play, and they've not been able to remove quite as many as they would. But that doesn't account for actually a backlog of 5 years. That's well before the pandemic. 3,500 people waiting still to be deported.
Calvin, any thoughts on this one?
I don't buy the story that it's all down to the ECHR. I'm convinced that there are many hurdles put in place by the civil service. I don't think the Home Office wants to see us deporting people.
Yeah. I mean, there was that story, wasn't there? Was it two weeks ago? Somebody at the Home Office saying we're all disgusted by the Rwanda plan, to which my response would be, if you don't like the money the taxpayer's giving you to do a job in the civil service, do something else.
Yeah, I can't really comment on what individual members of the civil service are saying. That's certainly your opinion. It may well be true. And we do know, as you say, these public comments that have been reported in terms of those who are rather dissatisfied with the approach to try to send people off to Rwanda. Let's see what they think about the Nigeria deal. It's not the Rwanda deal. It's not going to mean that individuals are being sent, they're asylum seekers, but it won't just be foreign national criminals. There will be migrants who are sent there, so the people that you've been reporting on that have come across in small boats, if they have gone through that process and then they no longer have leave to remain here in the UK and they're from Nigeria, they'll be sent back to Nigeria.
Got it. Mark, thanks very much indeed. Well, away from those plans to deport foreign criminals, an ongoing crisis in the Channel of illegal migrants, as Mark was just saying, making it onto British shores. For centuries, the English Channel was seen as an unbridgeable moat around our island nation. Effectively, in recent years, that article of national faith has worn thin. Migrants in those flimsy, inflatable boats have made a mockery of warnings that the world's busiest waterway could be routinely, if not always, safely crossed. The migrants have come at all times of the year, undeterred by winter weather or the wakes of supertankers, but it's the midsummer months when numbers surge. One woman has taken it upon herself to record these landings. Her name is Kim Rye. These are her pictures. Sunrise above the English Channel. A rescue vessel has just landed migrants on the shingle beach at Dungeness in Kent. These are the months people smugglers like best. Short, midsummer nights, meaning lots of daylight, for a crossing in seasonally calm waters. It's an evocative image. You could imagine a magazine editor sending a professional photographer to take them. Ideal for a Guardian headline like "New Dawn for Migrants." But these pictures haven't been commissioned by a news desk in London. They're the work of a local woman called Kim Rye. Why does she get up early to do this? Because, she says, nobody else does. Something profound is happening in the community where she lives, a phenomenon with potentially far-reaching consequences, which needs, she says, to be documented. A couple of years ago, dog walkers and other early birds started to see these columns of predominantly young men disembarking on the beach. Now, it's a daily occurrence. For the rest of the country, out of sight is out of mind. But here in Kent, it's how the day often begins. Kim Rye films them, but she does something else. As a local councillor, she feels a democratic duty to speak up for local residents, to try to establish who these people who are arriving every day, uninvited, actually are and why they're here.
Why have you left France?
No, I don't speak English. No, not speak English.
Well, you're speaking English now.
We don't speak very much.
I'm asking you why you left France.
We don't speak very much.
Along the Kent coast and Dover today, more migrant arrivals courtesy of the Border Force. Images like this you might have seen before. This port is where the mainstream media outlets send their cameras. But it's only part of the Channel migrant story. As the footage filmed by Kim Rye suggests, all along England's south coast, the equivalent of a small town's worth of mainly young men is being disgorged on the beaches now annually. The numbers keep growing, as does the affected coastline. A fortnight ago, migrants landed as far away as Devon. The English Channel, so long a watery barrier, is fast becoming a migrant conveyor belt. Let's get some reaction to this. Steve Valdez-Simons is with Amnesty, speaks on migrants for Amnesty International UK. Steve Valdez-Simons, appreciate your time. What should we say to someone like Kim Rye, who is a local councillor, who feels it's part of her democratic responsibility to try and understand what's happening in her midst?
Well, I think it's very important for people to understand what is happening on the South Coast and in communities, including the one that she represents. Of course, that has to be put in a fuller picture. We still, although numbers have risen, we still in this country receive relatively few people seeking asylum. And that is so compared to our nearest neighbours in Europe, including France, let alone countries elsewhere. So it's not a particularly dramatic thing that this country receives. Certainly the whole country is responsible for sharing responsibility, not just the people of Kent or the communities in Kent. But we are obliged legally by our international duties that we signed up to decades ago to play our part in providing safety to people fleeing persecution. And to do that, of course, proper assessment needs to be made of people's individual claims.
The Reverend Calvin Robinson has a different view. Calvin, what's your take?
Well, Steve, I'm just curious because I thought that a refugee had to claim asylum in the first safe country that they landed in. Now, most of these illegal immigrants we're seeing in this footage right now are crossing over the channel from France, a very safe country, into the United Kingdom. So they're not fleeing persecution or anything, are they? They're fleeing a very safe country. Why have they not claimed asylum there, do you think?
Well, I think there's two things to say in response to that. Firstly, we should be absolutely clear. There is no principle in international law, hasn't been for the last 70 years, of any idea of claiming in the first so-called safe country. That is a myth made up by politicians in this country and indeed elsewhere who seek to absolve themselves of the responsibilities that we share with others. And if there were such a principle, of course, all it would mean, which would be dramatically fatal to international refugee law, is that countries that border conflicts and persecution would be the sole countries responsible for providing for people, even though they continue to be the countries that take by far the greatest share of responsibility compared to countries like us. The situation in France is that France already receives very many more refugees into its system, has done for many years. And the truth is that some people, few, but some people, cannot access the asylum system in France. It's something well documented by Amnesty and others for many years. And finally, many of the people, not all, but many of the people who make these crossings have particular connection to this country, including family here. And since we make no provision for them to be able to make any journey other than this one, it's unsurprising that we do this.
I mean, that on the last point, that becomes slightly self-fulfilling, doesn't it? In the sense that the diaspora keeps getting bigger as more people come to join it. So it becomes the magnetising impact of that is increased by the more people who come here. So that becomes slightly self-fulfilling. Calvin, have you got a point to make?
I just think if we want to do this properly, we should work with the countries on the borders of conflicts so that we have agreements in place to legally take a certain number of refugees. And then we would be working in a number that the British people are comfortable with. And you keep saying, we take relatively low, relatively this. Relatively doesn't help when we see that we cannot afford to live in our own country. We're taking in numbers that are harmful to our systems, hospitals, schools, etc. Then it's all about what we can comfortably fit in. It's not about how compared to France, it's not about compared to Spain or Germany. It's about what we as Brits can take on board comfortably, what we can afford, what resources we have to help. And we should do it properly. And when we see people crossing the channel, throwing their documentation away, crossing illegally, it suggests to me they don't want to do things properly.
Well, to be clear, there is no, as you put it, proper route for any of these people to take. So this is all that's left. I agree, in fact, that it would be far better to have arrangements with other countries, including France, so that people could make lawful journeys here and we could share responsibility and have a more managed system. That would be great, but we don't. We don't do it. So this is what is left. I do think that we have to recognise the fact that just as we have concerns about how much responsibility we as a nation are prepared or able to take, so do countries elsewhere. And since many of those countries have far fewer resources than us, if we are not prepared to step up to the mark, I'm afraid all we will see is a continuation of journeys like this.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with those international comparisons is that they can be quite odious, can't they? And you could look at, for instance, very, very wealthy nations in the world who adamantly refuse to take any migrants or asylum seekers. Some very wealthy Gulf states spring to mind, don't they? Steve Valdez-Simons and Calvin Robinson, thanks both very much indeed for your time. Today saw the release of the monarchy's annual financial statement, where a multi-million-pound renovation of Buckingham Palace helped to drive up the cost of royal living. Spending has increased by some £15 million. Sir Michael Stevens, the keeper of the Privy Purse, says it continues to be a challenging time for the monarchy, even though the annual review of the royal household reflected a return to post-lockdown normality. Travel, investitures, garden parties, all starting up again post-COVID. We're joined by Charles Ray, former royal correspondent at The Sun. Hi to you, Charles. They're getting more expensive. They're getting more expensive, these royals.
Well, yes, they are. But there is this fund that has £360 million that's extra that's helping to refurbish Buckingham Palace. Now that's going to be paid for over 10 years and it ends in 2007. So that puts up the sovereign grant. But the royal family, like other companies, other institutions, has also suffered as a result of COVID. And over the last 2 or 3 years, it's lost £18 million in revenue from people, coming in and, visiting the palaces and buying various gifts at the various shops. So it's yes, there is a £15 million deficit, which has been repaid, if you like, because the royal family have dipped into the reserve fund. And people tend to sort of look at it, oh, well, the royals, they cost so much money, we shouldn't have them. It's still only £1.29 per head of the population. And I don't think it's that bad a deal, to be perfectly honest.
Charles, can you just clear up something for me? Because I'm not entirely sure on this, even now, on my ground on this, that there's the sovereign grant. People keep referring to it as money from the taxpayer. My understanding is the sovereign grant derives from the Crown Estate. And the Crown Estate is a property portfolio, isn't it? It includes things like large parts of Regent Street. And it used to belong to the royal family.
There is a property portfolio, you're absolutely right, the Crown Estate, but the sovereign grant is the money that we, you, me, and everyone else who's watching pay for in taxes for the upkeep of the royal family, for their official duties, also for the running of the royal households. And that doesn't include the Prince of Wales, he has his money from the Duchy of Cornwall. So there is a lot of money around in terms of the property portfolio. Most of the royal palaces are owned by the state in any case, and they're very expensive, to run, but they're also good assets.
And they've spent a few bob, Charles, on this, getting the lawyers in to look at whether Meghan's a bully.
I mean, I'm astounded. I'm actually quite annoyed because this was something that they announced in March last year because various people complained that Meghan had bullied them, allegedly. She's completely denied all this. So the Queen brought in some lawyers to carry out an investigation, and they promised that the result of this investigation we would know about in this publication of this sovereign grant publication today. And what they've done is they've said, we're not going to let it know, it's confidential. I think as a result of it, we are paying these people, we are paying the royal family an awful lot of money. And I think it's right, it's in the public interest, if one of them is being accused, very much like Prince Andrew, who denied all his allegations, and very much like Harry and Meghan, if they've been accused of various things, then we should know the result of any investigation. It should not be hidden away. And interestingly, I think they're doing Meghan a disservice because if she has to be exonerated, then they're not exonerating her. In fact, they're saying that there are changes in their HR department of dealing with staff, which gives you the impression that the girl's done something wrong. So we're now left with, is Meghan a bully? Is Meghan not a bully?
Yeah, and we look at the number of people who decided they couldn't work with her and we arrive at our own conclusions, don't we? Charles Ray.
Exactly.
Thanks very much indeed.
All the best.
Cheers, Charles. 25 minutes past 5. Lots of emails coming in on the subject of migrant crossings in light of that footage we were sharing with you earlier. Angela says, why are veterans sleeping in doorways but illegal economic migrants are sleeping in hotels with 3 meals a day? The young people in Ukraine are showing up these migrants for not staying and fighting for their countries. Wendy says, why are we not taking away the thing that these immigrants are entering the UK for? They should not be entitled to our health, education or benefit system. Housing should not be provided. They should have to support themselves financially, just as they would in their native country and just as we would have to should we move to another country. Only once they've been contributing to the country through taxes for a period of years should they be entitled to any of the financial benefits associated with this country. Adrienne says, those people may be displaced. Where is the research regarding where they're coming from? They need to be compassionately delivered to a neighbouring safe country from where they come from. GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, there's been chaos at Heathrow today. Airlines forced to cancel a slew of flights last minute. Could the summer of travel chaos, I'm sorry to use that phrase again, be a benefit for British tourism? The travel writer and broadcaster Andy Mossack will have his say. We're back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
we don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
You're with Colin Brazier on GB News on TV and on radio. We're going to go and talk about... Are we going to talk about... Yes, let's talk about migrants just briefly. And in particular, actually, it's not so much migrants as the deportation of foreign criminals. Mark White, a few moments ago, telling you about this story. We've struck a deal with Nigeria. Ken says, I'm sure the human rights lawyers will have something to say about this plan. Frederick says, it appears the government lawyers are not too bright, as the human rights lawyers in London and Strasbourg always manage to outwit them. Kerry says, pathetic, weak government and country, robbing the law-abiding taxpayer. It's staggering that we are so pathetic. Pretty damning. Ian says, anyone can just do what they want, and if you say anything, you're a racist and made out to be picking on people. We have rules in this country. We need to follow the same example as Australia. Rules mean rules, not just crying out human rights all the time. Let's talk about Heathrow then. This morning, the cancellation of 30 flights at the last minute. The airport, which is one of the busiest in the world, told airlines last night that it had to remove the flights from its morning peak schedule as a consequence of staff shortages. It meant 5,000 travellers woke up, or thereabouts, to find their flights had been affected, with one social media user saying they'd left home at 3:30 in the morning, only to find their flight cancelled on arrival at Heathrow. This the latest disruption for holidaymakers in the UK and people not just going on holiday but travelling elsewhere for work. Could the disruption on flights abroad be a benefit, potentially, for British tourism, with people rethinking summer holiday plans? The travel writer and broadcaster Andy Mossack joins me. Andy, welcome. I was in Cornwall 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was talking to somebody there who was saying bookings are down. The high water mark, obviously, during the heady days of lockdown, they were almost swamped at times by custom. When will it settle into a recognisable pattern, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I agree with you. I think during the pandemic, the staycation concept had something of a renaissance, didn't it? I think domestic tourism was literally wringing its hands with glee at the prospect of thousands of people coming to stay on our shores, which is great. And I think there was some kind of a worry that once there was this massive surge in bookings, once the chains had been put away, the domestic market would fall away. But I actually think what's happening is exactly the opposite. I do think this is a wonderful opportunity for the staycationers to to make hay, really, because there is somewhat uncertainty right across the world when it comes to air travel. I was a victim this morning myself at the airport, so I've got first-hand knowledge of exactly what went on. I can tell you, and it was chaotic.
What was the first you knew of it, Andy? What was the first you knew of it?
What was the first thing I knew about it was I got there at 6:15. I was getting a flight to Geneva, and I got to Terminal 5, and as I came out the lift into the terminal, I could see there was a line running from the left-hand side of the terminal all the way down to the right-hand side of the terminal.
Dear.
Now, that's a massive terminal. It's probably the size of 3 football pitches. So I knew immediately there was going to be something wrong. And it was just like a war zone. I mean, it really was. I couldn't believe it, actually. There was people sleeping overnight. There was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there without any refreshment. There was no communication from anyone at BA. It was really poor, and I was embarrassed for everybody, actually, in the travel industry to see this.
Yeah, and the truth is, if you're maybe thinking about booking a last-minute summer holiday with the kids, and you're thinking, actually, wouldn't it be miserable camping out at a terminal with screaming kids? Do you know what? Maybe I'll go to Yorkshire or West Wales or whatever. Andy, it's nice to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Hope you make your flight some other time.
Pleasure.
Andy Mossack there. Calvin Robinson briefly alongside me to ponder on staycations.
Well, I think this is the fault of the airlines. They fired they put about 11,000 people on furlough, but they fired about 8,000 people. So they brought this on themselves by not sticking to noblesse oblige and sticking by their workers throughout the pandemic.
Calvin, for now, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we will debate one topic of the day. We're asking about smart motorways. It gets people going. Should they be scrapped or massively modified? We'll debate that. First, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Colin, thank you. It's 5:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. A 14-year-old boy who repeatedly threatened to kill his stepbrother before being convicted of his murder has been named as Craig Mulligan. 5-year-old Logan Mwangi's body was found dumped in the River Ogmore in Bridgend in July last year. His mother, Angharad Williamson, and stepfather, John Cole, were also found guilty and jailed for life. They'll serve minimum terms of 28 and 29 years, respectively. Mulligan will serve at least 15 years. Senior Investigating Officer, Detective Inspector Leanne Rees, says the sentences have delivered justice for Logan's father.
It's incomprehensible that Logan had his life cut short in such tragic circumstances at the hands of those very people who should have been there to protect him. For Logan's father, Ben, who stands beside me, today's sentences are welcome news. However, no amount of justice can bring Logan back or compensate for the grief that continues to be felt.
The Prime Minister has promised to increase defence spending by £55 billion for the rest of the decade. The move's in response to the threat posed by Russia. The UK has also announced an extra £1 billion in military aid to help Ukraine. Speaking on the last day of the NATO summit in Madrid, Boris Johnson said the country has the power to repel Russia.
We need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries.
Thousands of travellers have had their holidays disrupted after Heathrow ordered the cancellation of 30 flights this morning. The rare schedule intervention came as the airport struggled with passenger numbers. Heathrow bosses say they're working with airlines to get those affected rebooked onto alternative flights. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.216 and 1.162 euros. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,488 and 93 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The interview I did with Kim Rye just after 4 o'clock, and the footage that she gave us from close by her home in Dungeness in Kent of migrants. There they go. There they are. Apologies if it's on the radio. I'll describe them to you. It's a file, a column of predominantly young men being disgorged from a vessel, I think a lifeboat, and then walking up the shingle. Later on there, being processed and given clothes and refreshments by officials there before boarding a bus, presumably to be housed in hotels and processed, their asylum applications processed, we presume. There's some of the other pictures. The point about these pictures is this is Kim Rye, local councillor, who feels she has a democratic responsibility to try and tell the story of what's happening there every day. This isn't Dover, where a lot of the cameras flock. This is just one of the many beach locations where these predominantly young men are coming ashore. A fortnight ago, as far afield as Devon. The numbers keep increasing, so does the reach of these flimsy vessels, and sometimes not so flimsy vessels, that make it across the channel, once seen as a pretty impenetrable barrier. John says, I wonder if that chap from Amnesty International, who we interviewed at the top of the 5 o'clock bulletin, that's just been on defending the illegal migrants crossing the channel, has taken into his home at least one legal migrant that's come over from Ukraine, or does he talk the talk and not walk the walk? I don't know, John. Baz emails to say, we cannot allow people, the majority you mentioned under 35, to come to our shores without documentation. They could be criminals, they could be terrorists. Adrian says, here's a thought, why not simply make the cost of hotels, food, etc. a loan that has to be repaid when or if they are allowed to stay? And Bruce says, why doesn't anyone ever ask people like your Amnesty guests just exactly how many people would you like to come in? I'll try and remember that question and put it to him the next time he's on. It's time for our debate this hour. The cause of smart motorway crashes could be investigated by a new independent body. The government's Road Safety Investigation Branch will analyse collisions in a similar way to air and rail disasters. According to a recent poll, over 60% of British drivers think that hard shoulders should return. We're asking, should smart motorways be scrapped or at the very least substantially remodelled? We're joined by former Met Police Traffic Sergeant Mike Rawson and lorry driver Sebastian Garner, who, I think I'm right in saying, Sebastian, you find yourself a fan of smart motorways because of what they do to congestion.
Well, they certainly help with the traffic flow, that is for sure, because you've now got 4 lanes to choose from. We're compared to with three lanes. So yes, it does help tremendously. But I accept that there are some issues with the new smart motorways. And I think generally, it's down to people need to educate the new way of motorways from now on.
Yeah. Mike Rawson, what would you change, if anything, about them?
I would reinstate hard shoulders as a matter of urgency.
How easy is that to do, Mike?
I don't think it's particularly difficult, Colin. Each stretch of smart motorway would have to be surveyed and costed. But to be honest, what price a human life?
Well, I suppose there is a price, and it's in no way to compare it to that of a human life, obviously. But I suppose the price, if I can put it that way, Sebastian, is that there would be more congestion, wouldn't there? Suddenly you're funneling 4 lanes of traffic, Sebastian, into just the 3.
Well, I accept that there are some issues, but the interesting thing is there are deaths on 3-lane motorways. You've also got to take into account, you look at the A14 that's just recently been expanded. That's now become a dual carriageway, but a 3-lane dual carriageway, but still no hard shoulder. But you can still drive at the same speed on a dual carriageway as you can for a motorway. So I can't just see quite where Mike's coming from on this. What we need to do is we need to educate people to drive on the new smart motorways. I mean, I drive every day, 5 days a week. How often do I see somebody or a new learner driver on a motorway? We don't seem to educate people how to use a smart motorway. There are SOS places where people can get refuge if they break down, but most people suddenly see a warning light, they suddenly think they've got to stop and pull over. They don't try and limp to those refuge areas, they just suddenly stop dead on the motorway. And this is where we need to be educating people to understand how a smart motorway works. And in my opinion, they do work, so long as people know how to use them.
Mike,
the hard shoulder equally is a dangerous place as well. And we've seen people pull up on the hard shoulder. We've equally seen people leaving a hard shoulder. They think it's just like a T-junction. They just pull out in front of you. I had a woman the other day literally just pull out in front of me. So there are pros and cons, but we've had motorways since 1958. We've had, sadly, we have had deaths on 3-lane motorways. But it would be interesting to see how many deaths we've had on smart motorways since they were installed in comparison to a 3-lane motorway.
Mike Rawson, answer some of those points if you like, but also just on the point about there being a new institution, organisation, body, agency that will look closely at cases like this, because it seems to me this has been a story in the news for 2 or 3 years now, smart motorways, are they safe or they're not? And it's fallen to a couple of very high-profile, one in particular, campaigner who lost a loved one in a crash on a smart motorway, to raise this as a subject. At least now we can be satisfied or safe in the knowledge that there is experts will look at this and arrive at a determination about what actually really caused a crash.
Well, just to answer the question about hard shoulders, let me clarify, if I may. When I say reinstate hard shoulders, I mean reinstate hard shoulders, keeping the 4 lanes of traffic. Just add the hard shoulder between the motorway bridges. So there's very little work, and the Transport Secretary is very disingenuous when he claims it would cost billions of pounds to reinstate the hard shoulder. On the question of the investigative body that you mentioned, I've thought about this, that, as you know, the police are responsible for the investigation of fatalities and serious collisions, and they represent Her Majesty's coroners, as well as provide the Crown Prosecution Service with the evidence to prosecute motorists who have erred. Now, maybe this new body based on the Air Accident Investigation Branch, which I have a great deal of respect for, maybe it will concentrate the government's mind a little more on the dangers of smart motorways with no hard shoulder. I would just say this about if you break down. Yes, sometimes you can coast to the nearest emergency refuge area, but when you lose all power, or maybe you suffer a couple of punctures, you cannot coast. And I know one thing, I don't claim that hard shoulders are totally safe. But if I had to choose between breaking down and being on a hard shoulder or being in a live lane in the path of a 40-ton truck, I know which choice I'd rather make.
Sebastian, we'll give you the last word, and the point that Mike raises there is an important one. There is a difference between the hard shoulder and these refuges and getting to them if you can.
I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree more with Mike. But equally, I can't see how a hard shoulder is going to be put onto a 4-lane motorway or a smart motorway now, because the 4th lane now takes up the whole width of the motorway. So I can't see how he's going to fit another hard shoulder in, quite frankly, and it would mean taking massive banks out in some places to get the hard shoulder on. But equally, I accept that there are times when you can't get to the refuge area. But maybe that what we need to do is educate people to be more vigilant and to observe other motorists if they do break down. I think it's more, what we need is more education for smart motorways and make people understand the logistics and how they're working. And I think that was where we need to be concentrating more at this moment in time, even if it's just an interim situation. But I think certainly the Highways Agency and the government need to be possibly putting out adverts and explaining how a smart motorway works. I think it's down to education. It's not down to the actual workings of it. But I think if people understand how it works, I'm pretty sure that we'll get over this problem.
Mike Rawson, Sebastian Gardner, we have to leave it there. It's one we'll return to, but thanks for your time both. Emails briefly on migrants, lots of them still coming in. Veronica says the answer to stopping channel crossings overnight, ID cards. We are constantly told the world is changing, our way of life is being abused. Time to debate how committed are we to stopping illegal migration. Audrey, as I watch another batch of what she describes as criminal lawbreakers, illegals arriving on our shores, I'm filled with horror at our lack of defences to stop them. My country is neither safe nor secure. Pauline says, doesn't anybody else wonder why, seeing as the French are so deliberately obstructive, despite the millions we're giving them, why can't we send in the SAS to where the people traffickers are operating from and destroy these boats? Someone please stand up for our human rights. Marine biologists say killer whales are deliberately hunting great white sharks and eating their organs after running low on their traditional fish diet. A pair of orca have been eating great white sharks off the coast of South Africa. The remains of 7 have washed up on the beach, on beaches, sons without their livers. Crikey. Some have also had their hearts removed by the orca's razor-sharp teeth. A marine study says it's a dramatic reversal of the oceanic food chain in one of the great white sharks' territorial strongholds. Let's turn to the study author, Alison Towner from the Dyer Island Conservation Trust. Welcome to you. I mean, it's gruesome stuff, but fascinating to watch nature in the rawest sense here.
Yeah, sorry, I apologise. I think the internet connection's a little bit dicey. But yeah, absolutely, Colin. It's been a shocker of a situation to witness. And, as the science is going on, it's struggling to keep up with the ecological impacts. It's really something else.
And how new is this? I mean, and is it a function of just there not being enough fish to feed on? Has something happened in the relationship between these two species?
Yeah, so one of the theories at the moment is that there's a reduction in offshore prey that the orcas would usually be targeting, so it may have caused them to come more coastal, but that's now directly put them overlaying with the habitat that great whites are occupying, and therefore the white sharks have been kind of driven out of their prime aggregation sites.
And I mean, I hate to reduce this to the level of playground politics, but is it always the case that an orca, a killer whale, as was, will successfully be able to turn on a great white shark of sometimes some length?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really want to believe it, do we? Eventually, and Spielberg made the white shark into quite the top predator of the ocean and put fear in many people about it. But the reality is the largest dolphin species, which is the killer whale, is far more worthy of the apex predator top spot. And they've proven this time again. You know, they're highly sophisticated strategists. They work together. And, you know, they are mammals. They're rather intelligent. And so a white shark's not going to stand a chance. But equally, the white sharks are smart by showing these very large-scale avoidance strategies. You know, they don't
also known as running
away. To hang around would not make sense.
Avoidance strategies, presumably that means running away, swimming away. Alison, what's with the livers?
Well, the livers make up to about 1/3 of a shark's body weight, and they're full of lipids. So they're really, if you imagine it almost like the fat off a sirloin steak, it's the most nutritious, lipid-rich part of the shark. So they're pretty clever, these killer whales. What they've learned to do is just tear open the sharks with the pectoral fins, so basically like by their aeroplane wings, if you will, and then the liver slides out, and they chomp that, and they actually discard the rest of the carcass. And that's what myself and the biological team here have been dealing with, is all these dead white sharks washing up, minus their livers, piecing that together with the tracking data, the flight responses, and then finally we were able to publish the science today. So yeah, we have evidence now.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed the use of the word chomping. Not very anatomical, but we absolutely understand what you mean. Alison Towner, so good to talk to you. Absolutely fascinating. Really fascinating story. Thanks for your time. Thanks so much. Really interesting. Keep your emails coming in on that and the rest of the stories we're covering today. Michelle Dewberry's up next to give us a flavour of what's on the show. We'll be in time. So I've got Calvin Robinson to talk to about big sharks. Yes. Losing their livers.
Well, it's interesting that they're not eating the flesh, they're eating the insides, but also, from what I understand, these killer whales are bullies. I've seen footage of them playing with dolphins, you know, throwing them out of the ocean before they don't even eat them sometimes, they're just messing around with them. So they're the bullies of the ocean, it seems.
I didn't have you down as an expert on
far from an
sharks, so
expert.
thanks very much indeed. Michelle Dewberry's going to tell us what's coming up on her show. Michelle.
Hello, Colin. Yes, spending on the royal family past £100 million in the last year. Are the royals worth it? That's what I want to know. And the NHS, we all know by now the problems in it, but what is the answer? Is the future digital? What does that even mean? And would you buy into it as the user, as the patients, if you like? And also, kids, should they be allowed in the workplace? I'm asking Colin, of course, because of the review, whether or not they're allowed into the House of Commons. I don't know about you, Colin, but quite frankly, I come to work for a break from my kid. Sorry, son, if you're listening.
It's absolutely true. Michelle, thanks very much indeed. We'll end on that. Calvin Robinson alongside me. I know you take a strong view on this. I'm generally very supportive of the idea of kids being allowed into the workplace, but there are some workplaces which require deep concentration, yes. People to be able to respectfully listen to arguments being made. The most obvious place is the chamber of the Palace of Westminster, the House of Commons. You don't want people knocked off their stride mid-speech by a bawling infant.
Well, you'd be good at that. I saw you knock over a glass of water earlier. You still kept on track, you were not, missed by it. But if you had your baby here with you in a blanket, would you be able to, read the bulletin and do your job? I don't think you'd be able to do it in the same way, would you?
No, on that you are absolutely right. Can we just round up today's show on the point about the migrant story we've been covering? It's interesting. I mean, it's not a guaranteed litmus test of whether a story really matters to people. Yeah. Loads of emails on this. Why does it get people going to such a degree?
Because the country is at strain. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, people can't afford to house themselves and feed themselves anymore. Yet we're putting up people who have just swum over from a safe country in these expensive hotels, giving them food and clothes and giving them benefits and free free healthcare, free education. We're giving a whole host of benefits that we don't have access to ourselves. It's not fair, and the British people care about fairness.
Calvin, as ever, thanks very much indeed. I enjoyed having you here today. That's all from me. Michelle is next. See you next week.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. More thundery showers around through the rest of today, but not everywhere seeing them. Some places staying dry and bright. The winds are light, which means it feels pretty pleasant in the sunshine, but it also means those downpours are slow moving. Not many isobars on the chart, not many fronts either, but in this gap, the sunshine is getting to work and sparking off those slow moving thundery showers. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place. The potential for some disruption as those downpours, as I say, just drag their heels dropping a lot of rain in a relatively short space of time. The showers fade from Wales and southwest England, but we'll keep some going over the Midlands, northeast England, northeast Scotland through the night. Temperatures dropping down to between about 13 and 10 Celsius. On to Friday, and it is another day of heavy showers breaking out. A wet start for Aberdeenshire and the Northern Isles, and then the showers break out quite widely. Bit more of a breeze tomorrow, so the showers will tend to move through, and actually Wales, southwest England looking largely dry through the afternoon along with Northern Ireland, but some heavy showers again over parts of the east, the risk of hail and thunder. Later in the day, more rain will